First story is titled, Am I the a-hole for refusing to help my stepbrother pay for his wife's surgery using my inheritance money? First of all, I, 39 male, just want to say screw cancer. I've lost my mom and my son to this awful disease. My son passed away in 2015, but every day it still hurts the same. My mom and dad were divorced, and I mostly lived with my dad for several reasons. My stepbrother and I don't get along so well. To be frank, I didn't see him as a brother because of how he behaved during my mom's and my son's difficult days. I took care of my mother solely because my dad didn't care. He didn't even try to get the family to comfort me by at least visiting once in a while during my mom's sickness and after her death. No one wanted to spend time with me. I was not invited to birthdays, /family dinners, /New Year's Eve, etc. This year's Christmas was filled with tears and unpleasant memories. My loved ones weren't there, and I was literally wallowing in my misery, reminiscing about how my life used to be before everything was ruined. I remember 1 week after my son's death, my stepbrother had his wedding. He actually had the nerve to send me an invitation via my dad, thinking that I might attend. I was upset, not gonna lie. They downplayed my grief and made it worse to process my loss. I inherited money from my mom, but I haven't done anything with it yet. I decided to not make major decisions during the first year of grief. My days are the same, as I just visit my aunts from time to time and we talk. My dad and stepmom have been visiting my stepbrother's wife, who was in and out of the hospital for the past 2 months. I honestly don't ask, since my stepmom and her son don't feel comfortable talking about it. My dad sat with me and talked about the family putting money together to help pay for medical debts and prepare for my stepbrother's wife's surgery at the end of February. He asked since I now have money if I can contribute and help with the surgery. I refused and tried to change the subject, but he went on arguing about how I'm supposed to help my brother and support him, especially now. I only replied by asking him one question. I asked him, where was my brother when I was struggling? My dad didn't like that. He told me to let bygones be bygones and stop making this about me and making the situation hard for everyone. He said he promised my stepmom and stepbrother that he'll convince me to pay, and I'm making him look bad right now. We ended up yelling at each other, and then I told him that's not my problem. He got my aunt involved in this mess and keeps saying I'm giving up on family and I'm being spiteful and bitter. I felt guilty, but felt awful that they're asking for my mom's money. My mom, who they didn't even visit while she was sick. I understand what they're going through because I lived it with my son. It's every father's worst nightmare to see their son struggle like that. Then to have to suffer another great loss is too much. Now for the top comments. What's the old saying? You reap what you sow? No one was there for you, so how dare they demand money now? My advice? Go no contact with them. These people are selfish and toxic, not a a-hole. Absolutely. They didn't stop for some time to see how I'm doing. They were busy with their lives acting like nothing happened. I know that life goes on, but I was literally left behind. My aunt was there for me. She lost her sister, so she understands my pain, though it may not be on the same level. But a loss is a loss, and my dad and his family didn't lose what I lost. Not an a-hole. He has shown you he is not family. You owe him nothing. And shame on your father for making a deal with your money before getting it. This was what bothered me the most. He thinks he's entitled to the money because it's my mom's, and he's wrong to think that. Especially after his treatment and lack of sympathy when he saw what she was going through. That's what really hit me in your post. I felt guilty but felt awful that they're asking for my mom's money. My mom, who they didn't even visit while she was sick. That's all you need to say to your father. It's not my money, it's my mother's. And where were you and my brother when she was dying? Not a a-hole. Your dad certainly is, though, for telling his family that he would convince you to pay. Screw him. You are not obligated to take care of anyone but yourself. If you want to help, that's great. But it seems they just want to use you. Do whatever makes you feel best. And it's beyond ridiculous Opie's dad is upset because he looked bad. He doesn't seem so concerned about the cancer, only with being the good guy in the situation by making you pay. Not an a-hole, and don't let dad pressure you into something you don't want. So sorry for your losses. Now for the next story. Half-brothers threatened to sue me over $16,000. It costs them $158,000 and possibly their parents' marriage. When I, 25 female, was 3, My grandparents passed away. They set up a savings account in my name. The account was meant to be accessed by me when I was 21. At that point, it contained just over 300,000. My grandparents left me a letter saying they would like me to share the money fairly with any other Smith-Jones children, meaning my full siblings. Dad's a Smith, Mom's a Jones. By fairly, they meant that they wanted me to assess the situation and judge for myself what was fair. I never had full siblings, but I have two half-brothers, Mac and Joe Smith, who were dad and stepmom's kids. Due to the specific wording my grandparents used, I legally never had to give Mac or Joe any money. However, I see Mac and Joe as my brothers, and as the money came from our grandparents, I felt that the fairest thing would be to assign each of us 100,000, so we all got an equal-sized lump sum. And I figured that when Mac, the youngest, turned 21 and took his 100,000, we could split any remaining money. When I turned 21, Dad suggested I buy a house with my 100,000. I found a place I loved, but it was 130,000 and I couldn't get a mortgage. So Dad said I should borrow 30,000 from the account. I did, figuring I could pay it back before my brothers turned 21, and I have been repaying it. The account should be at 208,000 right now, but due to me withdrawing and then repaying that money, it's at 195,000, so I still owe 13,000. Joe turned 21 recently, and as I was giving him his 100,000, Joe noticed that there was less in the account than there should be. I explained and said I was going to put it all back before Mac, now 19, turns 21. Joe told Mac, and both boys said I stole from them and owe them the full 13,000 back, plus $3,000 of interest that they felt they would have gotten, and they wanted it all paid by the summer, which gave me less than 6 months to bring the account up to 211,000. I said I'd do it, but over 2 years as planned. The boys then wrote up a contract to that effect. I went to sign it until I saw that it said 6 months to pay it all back. I wouldn't sign as we agreed on 2 years. They said I should figure it out as they were entitled to that money and would be seeking legal advice. Later that day, I got an email, clearly written by them, saying that they intend to sue me for the 16,000, plus whatever's currently in the account, and additional damages and emotional distress on top of that. At this point in time, I'd given Joe about 50,000 of his 100,000 because he wanted it in installments. I responded that legally they were never entitled to any of it, and given their attitudes, I'd say they've already received an amount I deem fair, so that 50,000 was all they were getting. I then got a barrage of texts, calls, and emails yelling at me for going back on our deal. I blocked them. They then took to social media, saying that I was trying to screw them out of their inheritance, and rallying our extended family into harassing me over this, and it mostly worked as a lot of people messaged me. However, I got a message from this guy called Chris Smith. Chris said he was 27 and claimed to be my half-brother. I had never met him before, but he sent me photos of him as a kid with our dad, grandparents, and me. He showed me that he also had an account with 150,000 in it, and a scan of a letter from our grandparents saying this money was meant to be shared fairly among Dad's illegitimate children. Chris also told me we have another half-sibling, who is 18. He'd been looking for me for a while, but only found me when Dad shared Joe's post, which had me tagged. We checked with the solicitor to make sure, and as the boys are legitimate, they aren't entitled to anything in Chris's illegitimate kid fund, and as they are my half-siblings, they aren't entitled to anything in my Smith-Jones kids fund either. I sent the boys a letter formally telling them to back off, stop posting about me online, and enjoy the 50,000 because it's all they're getting. The day they received the letter, Chris got a private message from Dad asking if the boys can have some of Chris's fund. Chris also said no and told Dad we'd met. I told Mac and Joe about Chris and our other half-sibling, with Chris's permission. So, it looks like my grandparents, knowing about Chris before they passed, set up 2 funds. One for the kids Dad had with my mother, who was still his wife when they passed, and one for children born out of Dad's affairs, presumably to make sure no one tried to screw anyone else over out of hurt feelings. I'm getting a lot of crap, but holding firm on my decision. The boys have realized that I won't back down on this, and it sounds like I've caused a schism at their house, as Joe has all the money and no intention of sharing, so Mac is now feeling twice as screwed. Plus, stepmom apparently did not know about the other half-siblings, or that my half-sister was born after she and Dad got married, and she's made Dad move into a hotel. It sounds like Dad is looking for a long-term living arrangement outside of the family home because it looks like she is not letting him move back in. Dad is begging me to reconsider. But honestly, I'm done with all of them except Chris and my sister. Now for the top comments. Your grandparents were pretty forward-thinking. I think they just knew my dad well enough to know he'd mess around. You know, sometimes I wish I would maybe get an inheritance when any of my family passed. Then I see how money and possessions just destroy families. If I have anything left from my mom and stepdad, my sister and I are on great terms. When my dad passes, I'm worried I'm going to have to fight his wife and 2 daughters for the things I want. He has a lot of sentimental memorabilia I'm hoping for. The thing about inheritances is that no one is entitled to anything not specifically listed in the will. If the will states that the money goes to you at your discretion, then they're out of luck, and anything they did get was out of your own goodwill. Getting greedy and flying too close to the sun is a tale as old as time. Looks like they melted their wings, and are out of the money you were willing to give them that they weren't even entitled to in the first place. And what a shock that the one who already got his chunk won't share it fairly with the other one. It serves them right. You chose to give them £100,000 each out of your inheritance. That's not the same as them being entitled to 1/3 of the fund. You tried to do right by them and they tried to screw you over money you volunteered. Were the grandparents in question your maternal grandparents, Jones, or was it that your father's parents didn't approve of your stepmother / your father remarrying? Dad's parents. They never met my stepmom as far as I know, as he and mom were married when they passed away, and mom is still alive. The specificity seems to have assumed that he and mom would still be married, but he'd have had more affairs. Now for the last story. Am I the a-hole for telling my nephew that the reason he has designer shoes is because his mother is irresponsible with the money my husband gives her? I actually did have a reason to say this. My husband has a middle-income job and I stay at home. We have a 4-year-old boy and his sister is a single mom with a 6-year-old boy, his cousin. She lives in public housing and my husband gives her about $300 per month, which I found out about a year ago by looking at his bank statements. This amounts to thousands of dollars per year. Something that has always annoyed me is that she spends what I see as absurd amounts of money on items for her son that he quickly outgrew. Since he was 2, he's worn triple-digit price tag sneakers. And for his 2nd birthday, she got the whole family together and got him a cake that she told me was over $200. I see that as a waste of money for people of our income level, let alone her own. Recently, we were all together at my in-laws' house, and her son tried to dunk on mine by making fun of him for getting clothes from Goodwill. Obviously, he is too young to know better, but this is just stupid. My own parents were middle class, but we shopped at Goodwill because it's a good deal, and it's stupid to be ashamed of it. What made me mad was that, after my son got visibly upset, my sister-in-law started laughing too, like it was a cute little kid thing. I said, "Well, you only have nice clothes because your mother is stupid with the money my husband gives her." Cue sister-in-law screaming at me, and husband looking awkwardly at the floor. He is non-confrontational. And me passive-aggressively smiling until we hightailed out of there. One of the things she yelled at me during the confrontation was that I'm lazy and don't work. It's true that I don't work, but I keep our household spending down by cooking budget meals and carefully planning our budget each week. The whole incident was pretty upsetting, but she's been known to be aggressive towards me in the past, and I didn't like that she was enjoying the opportunity for her son to be mean to mine when thousands of our own household income are going to hers each year. Now for the top judgment. Everyone sucks here. All 3 adults. You should not have dragged a 6-year-old child into this bitterness over money. It's between the adults. He might have behaved badly towards your son, but is barely old enough to tie his shoes and is not responsible for his mother's poor decisions. If you have an issue with the money your husband gives his sister, raise it with your husband. Don't just lash out randomly at the most powerless person. Agreed. So disappointing to see yet another adult on this site rage at a child that they view as nothing but a stand-in for their parent. Also, that comeback straight up sounds like something a playground bully would say. Good job in showing a huge lack of maturity, OP. Everyone sucks here. Oh wow, a lot to unpack here. So you, a grown woman and mom, thought it was okay to trash talk a 6-year-old's mom to him? Granted that 6-year-old should not be bullying your son, but you should have age-appropriately told him to be nicer, and then talk to your sister-in-law. Secondly, your husband should have told you he's giving money to his sister instead of you having to find out in his bank statements. Not cool to hide something like that from your wife. That's $3,600 a year. Thirdly, you and your husband need to communicate about this money. Your sister-in-law's actions, her attitude and cruelty to your son, should have consequences. Fourthly, let's not police your sister's spending. Your husband gives that money to her as a gift, and it's really crappy when people add strings. If you resent what she spends it on, don't give her money. Problem solved. If you're worried about how this will affect her son, then buy him a few needed items she can pawn or sell, or offer to pay for some of his school or doctor bills. It's not my savings, so I don't feel like it's my choice. I wouldn't care if I thought she just needed the money, but I feel like she blows it on dumb stuff. Okay, Mrs. Big Shot. You really showed that 6-year-old kid, didn't you, sis? You're the a-hole. Agreed, you're the a-hole. In life, you can only control your actions, not your sister-in-law's spending or your husband's generosity. Instead, you chose to lash out at a child. And that's the end of this video, folks. As always, leave a comment and hit like and subscribe. And if you want more of this content, turn your notification on to get updated on the latest videos. And I'll catch you in the next one. Stay safe.